So we're going to go back to the normal on the corner office. I'm going to start out with the top 3 corners in the NFL right now. And in number 1, and probably more than likely no one's going to overtake him, is Mr. Bland from the Cowboys. He now has 8 interceptions and he leads the league by quite a bit. Coming in at number 2 is Adebo from the Saints. He's also been on this list and he has 4 interceptions as of this week. And then coming in, I think he's new, but I don't keep all my notes, is Taylor Britt from the Bengals. He is now number 4. So those are the top corners of the week, and I'm sure Bland's gonna blast past that current record that he is tied for at this time. So he's gonna be the top corner at some point. He's got the record. And I have to be honest, even though I'm not a Cowboys fan, I do really like his. I like what he's doing there. So, all right. Well, this one, Delilah, why don't you and I both kind of talk about this? Because if you watch the 49ers and Eagles game, we know all about this. I'm going to call it the Dom dilemma. And that was my nickname for him. As everybody knows, Greenlaw, who played for the 49ers, essentially tried a wrestling move and body slammed to Devonta onto the ground and earned himself a flag and a personal foul. I mean, there's no other word for it. That's what it was. And then Dom DeBianco, which if you don't know who he is a I had it on another piece of paper. I'd wrote down his actual title. He's like the assistant to the general manager and the chief of security officer for the Eagles. And he's been on the sidelines. A lot of people have talked about him. People in the Phillies love him. Well, he was not happy with that what Greenlaw did. And so he shoved Greenlaw off of Devonta. Well, as we all know, what ended up happening is Greenlaw got a penalty, personal foul, unsportsmanlike conduct, 15-yard penalty. And then DiBianco, after that was done, there was a pause for a little bit, and then DiBianco was told by the officials on the field and escorted off the field and told that he needed to leave and that he was also being disqualified along with Greenlaw. And so there's been a lot of talk about this one, and I kind of wanted to just go into this one a little bit because they were saying like a lot of the stuff that was coming out was like, how can the NFL do that, et cetera, et cetera? Like he's not a player, he can, et cetera. But here's the thing: is that as always, there is a rule in the NFL. Under the rules for the NFL, under Article 2, Rule 13, it's called non-player conduct. And that's also in the section that they talk about all the fouls. And I talked about personal fouls last week. And what that says in there is, and I'm pulling it up so I can say it correctly, there shall be no unsportsmanlike conduct by a substitute, coach, attendant, or any other non-player entitled to sit on a team's bench during any period or timeout, including between halves. So, I think you probably have also read, like, the NFL is looking into this. They're looking at all of this. This is also another example of what I mentioned last week, which is if you have a penalty and there's a review of that penalty, anything that happened after that penalty happened and going forward is subject to review by the NFL, and the refs can, and also the Iron Sky and New York can look at that. So ultimately, Dom, there's no flag to throw for non-player conduct. They could have penalized the Eagles 15 yards, which in that case it would have just offsetted violations. I don't know why they didn't. I'm sure the NFL will explain why they didn't get a flag for that. But it also says in there that the refs can decide to disqualify that non-player person. So All that being said, Delilah, do you think it was the right call to disqualify him, or do you think he shouldn't have been disqualified?
Yeah, I mean, yes, because I don't care what team it is. You can't just go in and start like ripping people off. You know what I mean? Like regardless of like what you thought happened, you're not a coach, you're not a player, you're not even the water boy, right? And you're running and you're just yanking grown men. You know what I'm saying? Like yeah, no, he should have gotten ejected. Now, what's crazy about that is that now we gotta start looking like weird rules of like what happens with a person pushes or and it's like that's why you gotta go in and look at this minutia of why because someone decided that they're gonna go a little above what they're were hired to do. It's just like
I mean, I think his emotions were high. He was trying to defend his player, which is what his which I get that because he's a member of the Eagles, but that's not his job on the field.
no,
His job on the field is to make sure that people who shouldn't be on the field don't get on the field.
right.
It's not to protect a player while they're sitting there playing. If another player had done that, that player would have gotten a foul
Oh yeah,
and
for
would
sure.
have been ejected.
Yes,
So if another player on that team can't do it, what makes it seem like the security guard can?
not at all. Yeah,
So he
basically.
didn't. I think the reason why he didn't get the penalty was he wasn't really trying
Mhm.
to escalate it. He was trying to de-escalate the situation, but he went around it the wrong way. He should never have stepped in. If anyone should have been stepping in that situation, it should have been the refs,
Mhm.
or two, the head coach
Right.
and pulling it like that. But as we all know, like you said, the head coach can't stop that. The head coach can't pull a player off somebody else. That neither can any of the other coaches. So I understand this guy is kind of like Philly has got these like local guys that end up in the team. They end up being these local heroes and
Right.
everything. But he stepped out of line. He seriously stepped out of line. And who knows what's going to happen with this one. But this is like what I was saying earlier too when we talked about the gambling policy and some of that stuff is just because you're a player in the NFL doesn't mean you're not subject to the same rules.
Yeah.
And maybe the only thing I can think about this is in a way I'm kind of glad they did what they did, which is okay, you can't be out here anymore. We're not going to charge a foul. And from the interviews I've read with Shanahan and other people, like Shanahan was hot. He was really, but he couldn't do anything about it because he's across
Right.
the field. He can't. So he finally was like, "Look, I'll start. Fine, we'll move on." But he was planning on talking to the NFL anyway. So the league's going to look at this. I think the reason, because again, because the New York and the Eye in the Sky can look at everything that happens during
Mhm.
that replay, they said, we're going to eject him. We want this to never happen again.
Right.
And the only thing I will say is because you notice how I said it said people entitled to be on the bench or by the bench. There are rules as to who can be by the bench and how far away from the bench they can be.
Mhm.
Hopefully, this guy wasn't breaking any rules because if he was, it's going to get worse for the Eagles.
Yeah, because I mean,
So
he made it onto the field faster than it's like what?
he was standing
It's
right
like
there. Like, that was my question when I
like
first saw it
what?
happen. I mean, forgetting all the heat and
Right.
everything, and it's in the game, and yes, the Eagles were frustrated and things are going on and
Right.
emotions are high, and you have a bunch of men with high testosterone levels playing a very violent game.
Yeah.
But why was he that close? What was going on that he needed to be that close to that bench? So I got a lot of questions. I was just like, what was he doing down there? Because I
Yeah.
mean, you got security guys, and I
Yeah.
get he needs to tell them go here, there, or wherever to make sure that nobody's jumping over the side or that people aren't getting in where they shouldn't be. But I just have a lot of questions about it, and I think this is gonna be a bit of a saga. It's just in my
Uh,
in my in my gut, I kind of think like,
they're
oh,
gonna
this
adjust
month there might
your they're gonna adjust your rules for you, and then you have to come back in a few weeks going, well, now.
yeah. And if next week, if they issue an opinion in the next week and they talk about why they didn't do what they did, then I'll be like, all right, fine. That's how you. I mean, as we all know, half these rules are subjective.
They
We
are,
talked about it last week, and I
but
do want to go back.
they're not gonna want that to happen again. So
Oh no.
I feel like they are going to, of course, investigate whether they do
Hmm.
nothing now. But now I know there's gonna be some policy in place for that because then they're like, we want to make sure people that are not coaches, that are not players, don't feel like, wait a minute, this dude over here is just, so I can go in there
Hmm.
and defend my players too, because it could become a whole other problem.
Right.
So I do think
Yeah.
now we probably, maybe not this season, because usually we see new rules for the, upcoming
Yeah.
season or whatever, but
Yeah, we're gonna see. Yeah, I definitely think we'll see that with this one. I also think we're gonna see a change in the policy when it comes to the photographers
yes,
and that stuff.
and that
So,
too.
like, I mean, it's one of those, and everybody's like, "Well, it's become the no fun league." Well, it's become the no fun league because you have people that break the rules, and suddenly you got to come up with a new rule for
Yeah.
why that is not appropriate. So, it was just I got to tell you, like, I saw that, I was like, "What the heck is this?" So, all right. Well, that was the corner office. Next week, I'm going to dig deeper into unsportsmanlike conduct and also some of the because I hit more on roughing the passer and
Mhm.
the helmet rule the first time, so I'll hit more on unsportsmanlike and all of that. And then after that, I'm planning on doing an instant replay show leading
Oh,
into playoffs and things like that. So
cool.
we have some ideas, and the corner office will continue with the rules discussion,
Hey,
which
there's a lot
I
of
think is
them.
interesting. There's a lot
Yeah.
of them. I mean, I was sitting there in the game on Sunday and a few things that happened, and people are losing their minds. And I'm like, well, that's what the rule says, guys. That's how it is. And they're like, no, it's not. I'm like, no, it is. Like, here it is. Here you go. So